Welcome to Laurier's Teaching Excellence Conversation Series. I'm Deborah Van Eyneton, Academic Director of Teaching Excellence and Innovation at Wilfrid Laurier University. Today I'm with Jonathan Finn from the Communication Studies Department in the Faculty of Arts. Jonathan received the 2023 Innovation in Teaching Award. Since joining Laurier in 2003, Jonathan has earned a reputation as an outstanding teacher, leader, and innovator. He has been instrumental in developing courses in visual communication and culture and has established himself as an innovative and student-centered educator and trusted colleague. Jonathan's innovations in self-tracking and surveillance as a form of pedagogy are experiential, engaging, and impactful, and I'm excited to hear more about his teaching today. I'm so glad to be with you here today, Jonathan. And I want to sort of start our conversation by saying I love that exercise that you use at the very beginning of classes where you initiate a collaborative approach with your students. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about that? Because I think it's really unique.
Yep, thanks. Also good to be here. That has an unfortunate name of good class, bad class. It's unfortunate just because it doesn't
I didn't
sound
see
very
that.
prestigious,
Yeah.
but it's descriptive. So I ask them, I begin by saying, I want you to draw on your expertise as students, right, in all the classes that you've had here, elsewhere, even high school if they're first years, and talk to each other or just yourself if you want. You can write some notes down about thinking back on your courses, what made for a good course, and then conversely, what made for a bad course. And it could be anything from the time, the room, content, what you were required to do, what the professor or faculty member was like. And then I say, I'm going to give you a few minutes to do this. We'll come back, we'll discuss. I make it clear that, we don't want names. It's not about that, right? It's about sort of generalities.
Yeah.
And then we come back and I put the big list on the board, on the whiteboard. And then I come up with a list of things that can make for a good course, things that can make for a bad course. And then we talk through them. And I say that the way I want to approach it is things that I can do as a faculty member, things that they can do as students, things we can do nothing about. So 8:30 in the morning, we can't do anything about that.
No.
So no point
Lucky the draw.
No point getting upset about it.
Yeah.
No group work. Like, okay, you don't want group work, I can make sure not to have group work or to minimize group work. You want participation, you have to participate, right? So it's a way to get them to think about it as a collective rather than me, the professor, delivering something to them. It's all of us in this room together trying to make sure we do more of the good than the bad. So, and it's been really effective. It's fascinating for me as the instructor to be able to see in a very quick snapshot what they like and what they don't like. And the other thing that happens almost every single time is they put, I would say, 90% of the responsibility on me.
Right. And so are you able to turn that around and say,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. To say,
guess what?
To say like, I'm one person and that's a lot, right? You want me to be funny, personable, entertaining, lenient, lots of explanations, available constantly, right?
Structured.
Yeah, right. So they want me to be hot and cold and everything in between. And so, I say, I can do certain things, I can try and do this, I can try and do this, but what can you do, right? Like, what are you going to bring to this to help, right? So if you have concerns about the expectations for assignments, talk to me. Right? I can only present you with guidelines. I need feedback from you about, is this clear now? Is there something missing, right? So yeah, it is pretty easy to turn it around and get them to understand that they play a role in this as well.
So did this ever take you down a path or the class down a path you didn't anticipate? You're like, uh-oh.
You know what? No, that hasn't happened. And I think part of it is framing it at the beginning as a very, it's very fun, free, but no names, right? This isn't about shaming anybody or anything like that.
Or airing any grievances.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And so it doesn't, it hasn't tended to go down that road. And the other thing is that I'm not coming up with hard and fast rules. This is just a snapshot, an exercise, right?
Yeah, but it's a very collaborative way to start a course.
Yep.
And I can see the dynamics in person, how they might play out. How did you use that during the pandemic? Did you use it online? Does it work the same way?
I did, I think. I don't have direct recollection of the pandemic ones, and some of the courses were half remote, half live, and
Oh, right.
um,
Yeah.
but it does work because it's the same.
Yeah, you're still
Yeah,
eliciting feedback
yeah, it's
and
still a
saying,
relationship, right? Like even if we're on Zoom, it still requires people to be there to turn up, and then the other thing I do with them is I take photographs at the end of the whiteboards and I post it up on the course My Learning Space page, and then we can revisit it, right? So I can say, remember when we had that exercise and you all said you wanted it to be kind of lively, active? Well, the participation is kind of lagging, so let's bring it up, right? So it's something I can come back to throughout the class as well.
yeah, that's great. One of the, I would say, core innovations that is at the center of your nomination package is your self-tracking pedagogy.
Hmm.
I had never heard of that. It sounds fabulous.
Yeah,
Talk to us a little bit about this. And I realize too, it's right in line with your research.
yeah.
Yeah.
So to my mind, or to my knowledge, self-tracking pedagogy doesn't exist.
Okay, so this is a Jonathan
Yeah,
Finn
yeah, yeah,
innovation.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a form of like active or engaged
Yeah.
learning.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm researching self-tracking. So, using a Garmin watch or
Yes, we're
exactly.
all,
Yeah,
yeah.
right. And most, if not all, students are doing this in some way, shape, or form. And so we self-track as part of the class, right? Like that's the most significant and important assessment part of the class is we self-track throughout. And then while we're reading about self-tracking, we are self-tracking and we can kind of think, how does this reading apply to what I'm going through this week in my self-tracking
So
practice?
what are we tracking? What are you
Well,
tracking with the students, and what kinds of things are you reading?
yeah, so the what you track, you have to be careful with that because that can get into some dicey territory if you're talking about
So
weight
personal
or
information.
exactly. Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I say you do not have to track anything personal at all. You do not have to use any form of technology. You can create something purely for the purpose of this course, right? So it could be
Draw a graph.
how often I watch TV, how often I go for walks, whatever, anything you want, right? With the understanding that you're willing to talk about your practice. And then I also have to talk to them about how that's going to be evaluated, so it's not as though we're looking for them to get better
At
at it.
anything.
Exactly, right?
Yes.
So
Right.
and that's different from normal self-tracking where you're trying to do this in some way to see some kind of improvement. It's not about that, right? So when I did it with my graduate students, many of them just burned out and they said like, we hate this now. And I was like, yeah, me too. Like by week 8, we were all like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's really, but that's a fundamental part of the course. That was unexpected, but it's in the literature around self-tracking
I
about
was just
the
going to ask that.
fatigue that
Yeah.
people feel about self-tracking. They get tired of constantly having to do this and being told, you're not doing enough. You need to do more. Yesterday you didn't have enough steps. You need to do more today. You're not sleeping well, right?
Yeah.
So our experience in the class directly mirrored a big theme in the literature about the
And what
fatigue of that.
kinds of literature are you accessing there? Is it the literature on surveillance? Because I know you're an expert in that as well.
It's a little bit, yeah, there's a little bit on surveillance. So it
Yep.
comes from lots of different places, sort of kinesiology, phys ed, there's health, like hardcore sort of health sciences research. I'm drawing mostly from the kind of social science and humanities side that are
Yeah.
more sort of philosophically oriented, that, thinks of things about what it means to sort of quantify these things about our bodies and about our daily activities. What kind of implications are there in
And our
quantifying
emotions,
things?
how we're feeling
Yep,
sometimes. Yeah.
yep, exactly. And so there's a quite a significant body of research on that, but it draws from a bunch of different fields, which I quite like. So the students get exposed to quite a number of different ways of thinking as well.
And then what does the assessment look like? I'm just thinking about course design here.
So I did it as a graduate course first, and
Yep.
I'm doing it as an undergraduate
Seems like a
course.
good place to start.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and do it as an
Yeah.
undergraduate course next term. So for the graduates, I created a centralized database that we all used. And I was also doing it as a research project. So that required ethics approval. So that took a lot of work, and there was quite a few hurdles to overcome. I'm not doing that again because of those hurdles. But
And just a little brief note, what did you use to create the database? Is it
Omeka,
an Excel? Oh,
Omeka,
Omeka,
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
right.
But even that is not officially university approved. So I had to do a disclaimer up front saying students that they didn't have to use it if they didn't want to. And
But I presume you could use an Excel
yes,
spreadsheet as
and
well. Yeah,
everybody agreed to use it anyways, so it was okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What we'll do in this case, and I haven't worked out what I want to do with the undergraduate one yet. I have fantasies about making them do a journal, like hard paper instead of computerized.
Yeah.
So it's basically that. It's me checking in with them every few weeks about how's the self-tracking going, right? Like both, are you doing it somewhat consistently? Are you writing? Are you looking through feedback on your self-tracking? Are you making connections between your self-tracking and the things that we're reading, right? And so some of that comes about in
Very
discussion in the class.
self-reflective. Yeah.
Yeah. And then a lot of it is work that they're doing outside, but continuously, right?
Mhm. Okay, that's great.
It's really fun.
Yeah, and the students think it's fun? Like,
Yeah,
what has the reaction of the students been?
very good. And
Yeah.
I'm constantly approached by students who are like, is there any way I can get in that self-tracking class?
Yeah.
So
So they hear they're obviously talking amongst themselves and
yeah,
saying this is a really cool course.
yeah,
But it is an example of critical pedagogy.
yep.
So do the students make that link? Or do you
Uh,
make it do you make that link, in the way that you design the course?
yes,
Yeah.
because the things we look at, almost all every reading is critical,
Yeah.
usually quite critical. But so we start to find out about the privacy implications of a Garmin watch or an Apple watch or anything. It's like how much data is being used, who gets it,
Yep.
who has control over
Yep.
it, who monetizes it, and why we don't get any of the profits from it. You look at things like the surveillance aspect, look at kind of Western-centric bias that's embedded in these technologies
Yeah.
around a focus on weight and calorie consumption, right? So yeah, we look at it like that about how our use of these things may be impacting our lives, even though in some ways it's very good and students will report very positive outcomes from them. Also recognizing that there's a little more to this than I thought,
Mm-hmm.
and it's that there's a lot more to this than I
Than
thought.
I thought. Yeah.
Yeah,
Leads them down different pathways.
yeah, and it's fun.
Yeah.
To me, you have to. I mean, in part, I think it helps because I wear a watch and track constantly. So I
Yep.
think you
So
have
do I.
to. You can't just berate it and say it's bad, right? And try and convince them never to self-track.
As you wear this watch and think, cool,
Exactly. Yeah,
self-track.
but be aware of
Mm-hmm.
and see what ways you can maneuver within the technology.
One of the things that I was really amazed at in your dossier and your teaching practices is that you're layering multiple pedagogical kind of approaches on top of one another, right? Because you've got, the self-tracking pedagogy, which you were fleshing out as a unique kind of approach to teaching, but also UDL, pedagogies of care,
Mm-hmm.
right? How do you do that? Right?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of the process of course creation, right? We all go through this. How do you create a course? Thinking through your course learning outcomes, and then you're thinking, what pathways do I use to sort of get there? Starting with UDL, how have UDL sort of principles really influenced, what you're doing in your course?
Mm-hmm.
The approaches that you use to assessment,
Yep.
for example.
I'll speak to UDL in a sec, but what I do want to say is that I blend a bunch of different things together. I'm aware of various currents of literature, but I don't follow any one thing, right? So it's not as though I'm just interested in UDL or I'm just interested.
Well, that's
It's
clear from your course
yeah,
designs. You're
yeah.
doing all kinds of different things.
I think I found out about UDL after I was doing it anyways.
Yeah.
And it was based in just recognizing that people are different.
Yeah.
And I like to do things differently, so I tend to draw diagrams. I love diagramming things. Some people don't. And so if I'm trying to explain a concept to students and I have diagrams, I'll do it in a diagram way, then I'll do it in a purely textual way or verbally, and then I might also have an image example, right? And you walk through 3 different ways of explaining the same thing, knowing that those people are going to get it on the first one. They might be a little bit bored for the second 2, but the next group is going to get it on the second one. That group's going to get it here.
Yeah.
And so it's the same with the assignment structures. Anything I can do in there to provide a few different options for people.
And talk about your 4P,
Yeah,
approach.
so
I love that.
paper, what is it? Paper, presentation, poster. Is it proposal? I think I might have changed the.
Yes, I think it is a proposal.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Where if they don't want to do it, so either you
So
can do a written
paper,
paper, you
presentation,
can do a presentation, like a
proposal,
narrated
and yeah,
PowerPoint or something like that,
yeah.
or a academic poster, or you can propose something to me, which is come to me with an idea, we'll sit down, figure out what it will be, how I will grade it, make sure we're both comfortable, and then off you go.
How big a class is this in?
I do that to 55. I do that up to 55 students. Mainly that's because I teach between sort of 20 and 55 students. In a first year level, the way the course is structured doesn't really allow for that too much.
No. Yeah.
But I could see that applying at larger
In,
groups
or
as
in
well.
different ways. Yeah.
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 Yeah. I couldn't imagine being more restrictive or just asking for one of those, because what you get is just terrific variety and a student who clearly excelled at doing a poster where another person would be terrible at the poster but has done a really good presentation, right? And so what you do is you get 2 really good projects, and if you force those students to do one thing, one might be good and the other not, right?
And in the process, it plays to the strengths of one and the weaknesses of another,
Yep.
right? If you're rigid in
Yep.
your approach. Yeah,
So
that's great.
It's more, it's for sure more work on the faculty side.
Yeah.
Until you get a pattern. But now I'm very comfortable grading different assignments and different formats. And so once you get that, it might take a year or 2, but then it becomes very easy.
So that was going to be my next question, really sort of advice for faculty in terms of how do you get started on UDL or applying UDL principles, right?
Yeah.
You sort of answered it when you said, recognize that students are coming into the classroom, from different perspectives with different skill sets, different ways and modes of learning, right, that speak to them best, and then how you can kind of work backward through that. But
yeah,
it does require a different lens on the way that you structure your course.
Yeah, and you're still doing the same work, right?
Yeah.
So it's not as though you're saying, for you, you're not going to have to do this. You're still doing the same work, but to me, it's like we're still going through the research process and building an argument, but you're communicating your argument via a poster, via a presentation, via a video that you make, or a graphic novel, or whatever the case may be, right? So you're still doing all of those same academic skills, but your output is different. Right?
It really strikes me too as you're talking. It makes the marking process different too.
Yep.
You might have a creative output,
Yep.
and then after that you have a text-based output, and then
Yeah, and that's
a
fantastic.
poster. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it's because that's, I'm reasonably familiar with that kind of material from my own education. So, because I was art and art history, so I have no problem with that kind of thing. And so I do understand there'd be some reluctance on some faculty to think, how would I even grade something like that? But what I would say to that is, you just know. You have a sense of the quality of an argument that's being made, whether it's being made in a primarily visual form or something else. There's ways to understand that.
And how, has the student really mastered, the messages that you were asking?
Material, yep. Is it there? Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things too is that comes through in your work is this pedagogies of care, right? That you seem very in tune with students, right from this collaborative discussion you have at the beginning, but just in terms of how you relate to them. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Again, that one, I think that one is.
Is that another one you kind of could name what you were already doing?
Yes. Yeah, right. Yeah. So you have that experience where like, oh, I do that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I didn't realize that was a thing. I just thought I was a decent human being.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But that has become increasingly important. I think it's also a site of frustration, right? None of us thought that we were going into a profession that we would think about things like
Yeah.
student well-being.
Yeah.
And so, I'm very cautious of my limits and what I can and can't do in that regard. But for me, I think of it in terms of maybe like a nice clear example is my course is one of 5 courses that a student's going to take.
Yeah.
Um, if I give them a 50-page syllabus,
It's never
no
gonna get
way,
read.
not a chance, right? So
Yeah.
understanding
Yeah.
that, they're busy, they have lots of different things going on in their lives. As much as I want them to put my course on the top of the pedestal, it's not
Right.
going to happen.
No. Yeah.
So just being realistic, right, and understanding that they have a lot that they're going through, a lot of things that they need to do. Doesn't mean you have to diminish the quality of what you do or the work or anything like that, but just understanding that maybe standing and lecturing for 60 to 90 minutes isn't the best thing. Maybe a 20 to 50 page syllabus isn't the best thing, right? Like, are there ways that you can give your material, get that material out there to them in a way that is going to be a little more accessible for them?
Yeah. And one of the ways I think that you've done that is by using tools like Omeka, which also facilitates multi-site learning, right, as
Mhm.
I understand it. So talk a little bit about that because that seems very innovative.
So that's one I would like to use more, but it's an REB thing
Ah, yes.
that is
Yes.
a bit of a block.
Yes.
So Omeka is basically used by libraries and galleries for collections management.
Hmm.
And so you can upload visual materials and whatnot. So what I was doing for the self-tracking course was I created a password protected site for our class, and then the students would upload their self-tracking into, right? So they'd upload screen captures of their watch or photos they took on their walk or something like that. So they were documenting their things that they were self-tracking and then
Hmm.
uploading them to this centralized site. The benefit of that is that we were all doing it together and you could see everybody's work, right? And then when we got into the class, you could pull from that collection and we could, okay, so Bob, how did your week go? And then you pull up Bob's example out of the collection, and everybody's already had a chance to look at it
And
anyways.
they're
Now
already
we can look
forming
at it.
questions. They're
Yeah,
are making linkages.
yeah,
And yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And then at the end, the end assignment was to make an exhibition from their collection. And that's one of the things that Omeka does really well. And again, if you think of like an art gallery as an example, you can make these exhibitions from your collection. So your collection, you search by keyword or date or anything else. And so the students have their collection of their self-tracking, which, amounted to dozens or in some cases a couple of hundred entries. And then they make an exhibition at the end that's online that everybody has access to and we can see.
But it also allows you to have learning happening in different places,
Yep.
right? Because you're going to galleries and you're going to museums and
Yep.
you're going to all kinds of different places.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. And so that's that. I really liked that one as a tool. I would like, I'd like to be able to do more of that. And this is so for my upcoming self-tracking. I like the idea of Omeka, but it's not an approved piece of software on
For
campus
the
yet.
PSIA process,
Yes, it's
right?
not embedded. There's nothing like that embedded in my learning space. And so I'm also hesitant to introduce a new program to students in addition to having to keep on top of my learning space and whatever else they're having to do in their other classes, right? So there's also the risk of, okay, now I've created this other site for us
Hmm.
on a different platform somewhere else, which you have to sign into, right? So I also have to be cognizant of doing that.
So how did you get to the point in your courses? And it seems to me all of your courses are like this, where these different pedagogical approaches and innovations exist together so comfortably. Like, is this, trying one thing and then adding another thing? But you seem to have a lot of things that are nested comfortably,
Yeah.
in the bosom of a single course.
Yeah. I guess a lot of it has been trial and error, right? I've been in this for 20 years. And so some things I've let go, especially the essay as the definitive test of a student's knowledge. That's gone. Students still write essays, and writing is of fundamental importance in my courses. But simply saying you need to produce a 20-page paper or 15-page paper
And
doesn't,
that's the major
yeah,
assessment.
that doesn't do it for me
No.
anymore.
No.
And I don't think that's an effective way to test a wide variety of people.
No, and I think the literature would agree with you
Yeah,
on that.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And some of it is just like I don't know, my own curiosity. Like I really like this. I really like this stuff. I love trying to come up with new ways to get students to engage. I love trying to get them to do something slightly different that they hadn't thought of before and see that light go off, or they're like, whoa, I never thought I would do this, or, you know, I really was nervous about this project and then I did it and it was so much fun and I really liked doing it. You know, those moments that just, to me, I don't know, why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah, but
Why
this
wouldn't
is
you try
very
and do that?
creative. You're using a very creative process, right? And I actually didn't know about your art and art history background, right? So
Yeah.
this all fits together really nicely. But what does your creative process look like as you're thinking about how can you shape, or fit in different approaches and think through elements of course design and assessment and activities in the classroom and when we go off to the art gallery and when we're here at Laurier. So what does that look like as you're thinking that through?
There's lots of diagrams. And
Yes, getting back to
yeah,
your
and I
your
love the, yeah, so
yeah.
like like sometimes I do my readings and then I'll cut them out and then I move them into different arrangements. And like, okay, if I cluster these here or these here, then this theme comes over to here, and then what am I going to do that's going to tie that to that? How can I tie the
It sounds
assignments
like
into
this is
this?
paper based.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah.
spatial
Yeah.
things going on. Yeah, so I like doing that kind of thing. And so like to me that's enjoyable. I love thinking about putting a course together. And my courses are not that, I don't know, they're not that interesting. Like in terms of their
I think your
structure,
students beg to differ.
in terms of their structure and everything
Yeah.
else, they look like a course, but
Hmm.
I put an inordinate amount of time into building them. And yeah, it's why when I see like a spelling mistake on a syllabus, it gets me so angry because I spent so much time on them. And I'll be like, oh, how did I
How
miss
did I
that
miss that
period?
the
Yeah,
first
exactly.
50 times I went over this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm always thinking of, and you know, so if these readings over here develop this theme around kind of user agency, what are we going to be doing in the assignment that's going to get them
Pull
to
that
like
out.
think,
Yeah.
oh, okay, right?
Yeah.
And so how am I going to have them at that week understand like, oh, wow, this is like what I just went through when we did our self-tracking assignment. I experienced what we're reading about right now.
Hmm.
And so, and that's terrific when you see students throughout the term. And
Making those
I often will
connections.
say like,
Yeah.
it's almost as if I did that reading in week 2, so we would be,
On
yeah.
purpose.
And they'll be like, oh yeah.
What advice do you have for colleagues who are thinking about innovating, right? But they might think, oh, this is going to be a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of work to kind of pull this all the way through the
Yeah,
course, right?
yeah.
To achieve my learning outcomes.
I'd say it's worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It for sure is more work than not, right? It's more work than just doing the same thing.
Yeah.
But the end result is so worth it. So absolutely worth it. Because when you, I mean, imagine if you get, say, I don't know, 5 out of 20 projects right now that really excite you and you're doing the same assignment. Imagine what happens if that doubles, right? Or maybe triples because you change things up and allow
Yeah.
people to do different things and kind of excite them a little bit, right? So it's absolutely worth it. We have such freedom and leeway and
Yes, we
support to
do.
do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I am surprised sometimes
Yeah.
at colleagues who feel like they are
Constrained.
constrained.
Yeah.
And
No.
I don't quite understand that. To me, it's like, just do it. Just try it. As long as you go in with sound pedagogical reasoning and student interest, right? As long as you go in with that, if it fails, at least you tried. And it's not going to fail colossally,
No,
right?
and you learn something.
Yeah.
So then next time you just adapt.
Yeah. And the failure works, right? So like in the self-tracking one where we all get really sick of it, that's a fantastic teachable moment. We're like, okay, we just experienced what we're reading about in the research, which is people who are tracking their running get really tired of it after a while.
Yeah.
And now we know why, because we're all tired of it. So what are we going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we just, then you have to change on the fly a little bit. But
one of the things that you're working on is a research project about the running app. what's it called?
Strava.
Strava,
Yeah.
right? Can you talk a little bit about this in terms of the relationship between your research work and your classroom teaching? Because they seem to come together so nicely.
They do.
Yeah.
It's almost as if I planned it.
No, but that's not always,
Yeah,
I think that's not always faculty's experience, right? Where their
yes,
research just dovetails and is interwoven so nicely with what they want to do in the classroom and what students are doing,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So first, a thank you to my department and discipline because I'm allowed to
Yeah.
teach these kinds of things and come up with courses like this, and which integrate with my research really well. So that I'm very happy for that. So Strava, yeah, is an app for mainly endurance sport. It's usually cycling and running. It has kind of expanded out triathlon, duathletes. There's
And you're an endurance
yeah, runner.
runner yourself,
There's
yes.
pro athletes on it down to recreational walkers and dog walkers that post to it. There's I don't know how many millions of people, a few billion activities posted each year. So yeah, I'm studying a group of local athletes and their use of this app, as well as the history of the app and its sort of strengths and limitations. My real interest in it is around that notion of what it means when we quantify our physical activity, right? And what happens when we think of something that, being out in nature and whatnot, what happens when we think of that in terms of metrics, right? Do we lose a sense of, I don't know, being connected to the outside world? Do we lose a sense of escape if we're, oh, this run wasn't as good as this one because I went slower? Yeah, but did you enjoy it? Right? But your enjoyment doesn't get tracked. Your pace gets tracked. Your total mileage gets tracked.
Right.
And so that fits really
I
nicely.
was just going to say with
Yeah.
what you're doing in the
Yeah. So that there's a
self-tracking course.
clear fit with the self-tracking, but I also talk to students about the kind of other ways in which their lives are quantified, right? And their grades, right? The quantification of their learning, and right, we have to assign a number to that, right? And then what does it mean when you evaluate yourself by the numbers that you get in school or however else? The kinds of metrics associated with their media use, right? Like how many likes are they getting? How many people are reposting? How many followers do you
This
have?
is very real for students.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
all of these
Right.
things.
Yeah. So I tend to tie it, and there's a long history of quantification, right, from around health from the weight scale over 100 years ago up to
Oh, yeah.
the present, right? So we draw on that material as well to say, this isn't necessarily new. This has been going on for quite some time. But what are the, what are the implications? What do you feel compelled to do because of this? How is your life impacted by these various things that quantify what we do?
It's funny, I sense also in how you answered that question, a little bit of reflection on your own time teaching there, right? When you're
Hmm.
saying, 20 years of teaching or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But in your dossier, it's really nice. You talk about phases, right? Phase one from your early studying of teaching pedagogy in grad work to getting hired at Laurier, setting up new courses, and almost at a frantic pace, right? Where we're
Yeah.
learning and learning and learning, and very steep learning curve. And then post tenure, and now you appear to be situating yourself in a third phase,
Yeah.
right? So how do you see that? What's this phase? I mean, it seems like it's a very productive and exciting phase in terms of innovating in your teaching
Yeah.
practice.
It's the excitement and experimentation phase, I think,
Yep.
which comes from having taught a lot and seeing what works, what doesn't.
But it doesn't have to
Also,
go that way, right?
how do you mean?
You see it as, exciting. For reflecting back and looking at, sort of what things worked or not,
Yeah.
makes you excited.
Yeah.
Some faculty don't, they feel,
Yep.
less energetic about it.
Yep.
How do you sustain that energy?
That's tough. I crash after classes. After I teach, I'm just wiped.
It's a special kind of exhaustion.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and people don't, people who teach understand that.
Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder, like sometimes I question, but I just really like doing it. And
Mhm.
and for me, I like the material. And again, I'm fortunate that I can teach
Yeah.
what I'm interested in, but I love it. And so before I go into a room or anything like that, I'm excited because I'm like, oh yeah, today we get to talk about this. And I get to tell them about this concept. And this is such an interesting thing. And I can hardly wait to see what they think about this. So I'm excited before I go in there. Sometimes that excitement isn't met. And that can be a little tough to take because you're like,
Right,
how
right.
can you not be as
Yeah.
excited about this
Why
as
don't
I
you love
am?
this?
This is
Yeah.
life-changing.
Yeah.
So there's that, and I don't see that going away anytime soon. I love reading new things, finding out about new things, doing new research. I don't see how that would stop.
But that's an important reflection, right? So, you're a case where your research that you're excited about interfaces so nicely with your teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And even your administrative life, right? It has enabled you to bring about some of the curricular changes
Mm-hmm.
that then feed back into your, teaching practice and the kinds of things that you like to do.
Yeah.
Right? So the closest, or to the degree that we can make those things come together for ourselves, then that probably helps us sustain our vigor and excitement about teaching, right?
Yeah, and right, and I think then I would go back to the point about like faculty can do this,
Yeah.
right? So be selfish, make make it. I don't mean just teach to yourself or something like that,
No, but yeah.
do something with your courses that's going to make you excited and make you want to teach them, right? So whether that's new assessments, new readings, new structure, or whatever the case may be, why not?
So then what's on the horizon? I know you want to do more self-tracking.
Yep.
Be great if Omeka was a little easier and was embedded.
Yep.
But what else are you thinking about?
Okay, so this is where my own personal bias is going to come in, where I want to get students off screens.
Mm-hmm.
And screens are lovely. I use them constantly in my job and everything like that. It's a tool, and it should be used as a tool, not as something that we just live our lives.
So how are you going to do this?
Well, so this for my next self-tracking course, I'm thinking of having them do a journal, and I'm going to say you need to buy like a sketchbook or some kind of paper
A dollar
hard copy
store.
thing. Yep.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to physically write in it. You might even have to cut and paste things, right? Where if you take a photograph of your thing, you might have to print it out and stick it in there, right? But anything to get them engaging materially and doing things, which we know from teaching and learning research is a great way to learn, right?
Yep.
If they're doing things.
Retention is
Yep.
augmented.
Yep. And so if I can, and the way I like that with self-tracking is self-tracking works because it's so automated. Because you and I are both being tracked right now and all kinds of data is being compiled and it's lovely for us, but we don't have to do anything. We just sit here.
Mm-hmm.
When I force students to then translate this and start writing about it, then they start to think, there is a lot here. Like there's, and why is this tracking this? And do I really want it to be doing this? Because you're making them stop that automated loop and think through what's happening and reflect on it. And that conscious thing of like not just screenshot, transfer from this app to this app, like actually taking a break from that and sitting down and writing or drawing or something else. So I think more of that in my future. I would love to get students doing, using cameras like to go document things, right? Or doing more journaling, anything like that that gets them physically engaged with doing something.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I see more of that.
Rather than just this.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait to see what you come up with next.
Thanks.
I have really enjoyed talking to you today. Thanks so much.
Me as well. Thank you.
My thanks to Jonathan Finn for joining me today, and I hope you will join me for more conversations that celebrate exceptional teaching practices, explore diverse teaching approaches, and discuss the future of higher education, teaching, and learning.